I was just about to do a countdown for this as we go live, and then I realized that I forgot to update the countdown from 30 seconds down to 10 like I usually do. And I'm not going back to a 30-second countdown, Stu. I don't care if it looks better to do a countdown. I can't do 30 seconds. It just makes me feel icky to be sitting around waiting that long. So here we are, Flyer Footy, back at you live on Thursday night. And Stu, it feels like it's been a while since we've been here live on a Thursday night. Is that just me?
No, it's not just you, though. You've been out traveling wherever in the globe, U.S. or just Kirkwood. I don't know, but it has been a little while. And it's going to be a while again before we have a upcoming little break in the schedule pretty soon.
That's right. Leagues Cup is going to do us a little bit of a favor for better or for worse in fixture congestion. Although, I don't even know how to take that. Are we excited for a little extra rest to get some guys healthy? Maybe get Kessler and Michael Wenzel back, or if we beat Minnesota, I guess we're a little upset because we don't get to keep that momentum going. That might be
but just for clarification for those out there, it is not a whole month-long break for Leagues Cup this year, unlike last year. So we do have a 11-day break, 10-day break between the 10-day break coming up.
Stu, riff on the Leagues Cup for just a second.
Oh, riff or rip into it? No, yes. Brian, I see you. I do not have webcam as per usual, but that is just simply because I am mourning the return of Anthony Markanek and the joy that he brought my life. Leagues Cup this year is spread out through the MLS season, so that does cause some schedule congestion at the end of the season, but they wisely did not take a whole month off this year. And next year they'll be taking an obviously extended break for the 2026 World Cup here in the United States. So it'll be interesting. One of our big hopes on the Leagues Cup, of course, this year, for the Wooden Spoon perspective, is Montreal Impact are the lone Canadian team, I believe, in the Leagues Cup. So hopefully, if they win the Leagues Cup, they'll also win the Wooden Spoon, and we can escape that. Hey, Matt, I don't know if we're live on YouTube right now.
Well, you know if we're live on YouTube.
Brett Stillman.
Better be live on YouTube.
Chat. Are we? Okay.
If we're not, I'm going to be a little upset because it says we're live on YouTube.
All right.
No, well, Brian and Josh are commenting on YouTube.
Oh, yeah. I got to learn to use my eyes.
Now I've got to log in as myself on YouTube to check, and now we're going to have to spend live time because of Brett checking out just to make sure YouTube's working. But we needed to kill time anyway because we have a giveaway to start off this show before we do our live pod recording. I have 2 to give away here momentarily, and I see us as well on YouTube. I think we're good to go as soon as my kids will stop leaving me alone. So give me 1 second, Stu. Stu, talk about Aston Villa for a second.
Aston Villa. Yeah. Well, former giants of English football, one-time European champions in the 1984, I think, 85. Exciting to have them here in St. Louis. We'll see exactly what the crowd's like for that one. Claret and blue. So one of 3 claret and blue English clubs, Burnley, Villa, and who's the third? Matt, who's the third claret and blue English side?
Burnley,
Villa, and
West Ham.
West Ham. There we go.
That's a crazy trivia. That's not exactly where I was going to go, but that's a good trivia fact.
No, I was just throwing it out there.
You think if Colorado doesn't Colorado have a claret and blue? Didn't they used to? I thought at one point it was Colorado was the MLS side that had that. I could be wrong. Anyway, let's do our giveaway. You ready? You ready, Stu?
Yeah.
Okay. So the problem we have with our giveaways sometimes is YouTube, X, and Instagram all are a little bit laggy on how quick we see the chat. So So I'm gonna ask this question, and I'm gonna take. We'll see who gets it right because it's a kind of a two-parter. And if multiple people get it right, I'll give you a little while. It's not going to be like boom boom. If multiple people get it right, I'm going to toss in a tiebreaker for those people, and then I'm fairly certain that will give us one single winner. It should be pretty good to do Price is Right rules type tiebreaker. So, question is pretty easy, and it is on topic for the city Aston Villa friendly. It starts easy, but hang with me because it gets a little bit more complicated. Pay attention to both of these parts. Who is the only player in City's history who has appeared for Aston Villa? And how many appearances did this person have for Villa in Premier League games? So I need an answer to both of those parts. It's a person and it's a number. So who is the only player in City's history who has appeared for Aston Villa? And how many appearances did this person have for Villa in Premier League games? And notice I did say player in City's history. That was a key to this, by the way.
Yeah, I don't think there's ever been any coaches associated with St. Louis City and Aston Villa.
That's shade. Shade.
No answers quite yet.
I'm seeing a couple good guesses roll in. Ideally, you would you just answer this off the cuff as opposed to going to a certain source to look this up ahead of time. But I'm going to let you do you. Obviously, anybody can look up what they want. That's part of this whole trivia thing. We're not at a trivia night where phones are down. It is interesting though to see the quantity here. Thank God our folks know the player answer. That one seems to be pretty apparent.
Yeah, and I think we have a couple correct answers in there now.
We do. I'm going to give it like 30 more seconds and see what we end up with. And then I'll call an end to it. And then because it's the lag thing, I'll wait another 10 seconds or so to make sure everybody got in. But the interesting thing is it would be hilarious to me if, as some kind of like ambassador to their team, Villa decided to shade us all and bring in Olaf as like some kind of brand ambassador who sat on their bench while we played them. That thought's occurred to me a couple times. Like, what if they found a reason to bring him on their side and just hang out and take it all in?
Oh, that would be incredible. I think his son, John Melberg, just went on loan, or is he breaking through at Salzburg, something like that? But yeah, no, I'm very curious to know what the clubs were going to do to kind of honor Olaf before he got sacked. That would have been a little bit of fun trivia.
I bet there would have been some. Let's call it right now. So if you get your answers in, and then about a few seconds we'll reveal the winner because we do need a tiebreaker question coming up for these two folks. But yeah, I bet we would have had some kind of like Aston Villa legend head coach Olaf Melberg type thing going on. But things that could have been.
Yeah,
for
somewhere
right
deep
there.
in the cellars of City or Energizer Park is a bunch of half and half scarves with Olaf Melberg's face on either side.
Oh, that would have been hilarious. In the same vein as like the Klouse and the Berkey like player scarves.
Those are gonna slip away to eBay in 20 years or something.
From Villa to the Louvre, kind of a thing. Oh man, we're gonna see those in the Middle East here in a few months, cropping up. All right, so the correct answer to our player question, who is the only player in City's history who's appeared for Aston Villa? It is the one and only Indiana Vassilev. That was a pretty easy question, I feel. At least if you remember Indiana Vassilev, obviously when we acquired Indy in the expansion draft back in 2022, ahead of our inaugural season, we acquired him from Inter Miami, who he was on loan with. And so when it comes to MLS rights and who he played for in MLS, we acquired him from them. But it was one of those situations where you had to do your homework ahead of time to make sure that Aston Villa would agree to either release him or continue his loan with us. And the process there was we acquired him in the expansion draft from Inter Miami, and then we acquired him officially from Aston Villa. So they transferred him to us. So that might actually make Indiana Vassilev our first. I might have to think about this. Well, definitely our first acquisition from the Premier League.
Technically, our very first acquisition would be Ezra Armstrong for $100,000 from Pittsburgh Riverhounds in 2022. Yeah.
Ahead of the City 2 season. Yeah. Yeah. So first acquisition from the Premier League. I think that one's correct. Because you had like Klouse, you had Pedro, Berkey. Yeah, Premier League would be correct. So the tiebreaker, the quantity of matches that Indiana Vassilev appeared in Premier League games is actually 4. Now, the tiebreaker is going to be between Aaron Leak and Aiden Musalihovic. Looks like both on YouTube. So Aiden and Aaron. The tiebreaker question is, how many minutes total in his 4 appearances did Indiana Vassilev play for Aston Villa in the Premier League? 4 matches. How many minutes? Closest one to the pin wins. And the while they're thinking about this and while they're getting this in, I did specify it to Premier League because I do believe he played additional matches and minutes in the FA Cup. I think the FA Cup might have been where he actually broke through, but
yeah. Well, I just had his Wikipedia up earlier today, but I believe that's right. Between loans he took over there. Oh yeah, and John Melberg plays for Red Bull Salzburg, and he played in the Club World Cup. So he is, he's expected to be a starter for Sweden in the World Cup next year. They're pretty excited about him on their back line.
Nice. Melbourne connection to the Club World Cup.
Yeah, St. Louis City is a massive club.
Yeah, Josh called that out in the chat too. Played in the Club World Cup for Salzburg. All right. Aaron said 86 and Aiden said 85. Well, as it would turn out, the answer is 47. This is one of those where Indiana Vassilev didn't exactly break through with Aston Villa for an extended period of time, but he did break through enough that he saw 4 career appearances in the Premier League, totaling 47 minutes in those 4 appearances. Aiden is closest to the pin. So Aiden, congratulations. You just won yourself 2 tickets to St. Louis City versus Aston Villa. If you want to reach out to us on either Twitter or Instagram, just send us a DM. Our DMs are open at FlyOverFooty or at Matt Baker STL, and we'll get those over to you. Just need your email and you are good to go. Congratulations, and hope you have fun next Wednesday at the Aston Villa match. All right, Stu, you ready to do the pod recording now?
Let's get going.
All right. Hopefully if you came for the transfer window talk, hopefully you'll stay for the preview to Minnesota United, because I think we've got a jam-packed show with a lot of good stuff. Welcome everyone to FlyOverFooty on the Big 550 KTRS. My name is Matt Baker, joined by my friend in soccer, Stuart Holtgren, for a jam-packed episode of FlyOverFooty where we have tons of transfer window news. The transfer window is officially open as of July 24th, so we are celebrating the opening of the MLS summer transfer window opening up and the influx of new players that are arriving for St. Louis that we already know about and we're going to talk about here in just a moment. But we also have a match to preview. The MLS season is still going on. It's not going the direction we want it to, but we still have a match to preview, and we're going to do that in full. Stu, how you doing on this momentous occasion of the transfer window opening?
I'm doing fantastic. Hope springs eternal, and hope springs with the window opening and with new arrivals.
New arrivals, and as we talked about before, we went on a departure, at least one, multiple depending on how you look at it. But we're gonna start this show by going through pretty much every single thing we have to get you caught up to speed about the changes to the city roster going into this transfer window. And it starts with, we'll start with probably the biggest official thing that happened in this past week, the acquisitions of Songbin Jong and Devin Padelford, both from Minnesota United. Songbin comes to us. He's a 23-year-old South Korean forward. Comes to us in a cash for player trade with Minnesota United in exchange for $1.6 million and up to $400,000 in conditional cash-based performance incentives. Songbin joins us as a U22 initiative player, meaning that he will hit the salary cap at just a paltry $200,000, making this one of the biggest bang for your budget mechanisms that MLS has to offer. And he comes to us with a pretty hefty price tag. And I believe his transfer market value is around 2.4 million. So we paid 1.6 million with up to 400,000. And it also becomes St. Louis City's first ever cash for player trade, as this mechanism was just introduced this past offseason as a way for MLS to have an internal transfer market. That's basically what it is. Previously, you could only trade GAM inside MLS to other teams in trade for a player. Now you can trade just pure cash. And so it opens up the possibilities inside of MLS to make it more akin to competing with other teams. And we know that multiple teams in MLS have done this. Off the top of my head, I know Jack McGlynn was a cash for player trade. There were a few others. Dejan Joveljic, I think, was one as well. Going from LA to Kansas City. So it's been used a few times, and 1.6, it stacks up pretty well in that market. Songbin had been a little bit on the outs from Minnesota, hadn't played a whole lot. And as Lutz Pfannenstiel said in the press release, Songbin is an exciting attacking player with great pace and creativity in the final third. He brings versatility to our attack, the ability to stretch defenses with his runs in behind, and a high work rate that fits perfectly with our intense style of play. We're always looking to add young, dynamic players with high potential, and we believe our system will allow him to showcase his qualities and reach another level in his development. Stu, what do you think about this Songbin Jong acquisition?
I'm excited about it. I mean, I didn't dive too deeply into what kind of profile he fits, but he can play up top, but he's primarily a player out wide. And everything that I've heard of him is that he's a pacey winger. His end product is somewhat lacking, room to grow there. However, we pretty desperately lack pace. So the idea of him, challenging attackers down the line and getting the ball into Klouse is really, really appetizing. And he needs a change of scenery. He didn't exactly light the world on fire with Minnesota, but he had incredible vibes over there, and the fans loved him. And he had an amazing bromance with Bongi, their star over there. So hopefully he brings some of that charm and love down south in the avenue of the Saints Derby.
And Songbin will be with St. Louis, finishing out his contract through the end of the 2025 season, and has a club option for 2026, which St. Louis now picks up. Minnesota will retain a sell-on percentage, which is standard for any transfer like this. Typically, the sell-on percentage is around 10%. So for Minnesota United fans, they'll remember that. The other thing is Songbin's statistics over the past year plus don't light the world on fire, like you said, Stu. So why is that the case? And what is the backstory behind St. Louis acquiring Songbin Jong? Two pieces to that. One is Songbin was acquired by Minnesota under Adrian Heath, previous manager. They are now coached by Eric Ramsey, who has changed up their style just a little bit. They use counterattacking, they use wingers, and Songbin, there have been other acquisitions since Songbin. The idea that he's just not found a spot on this roster has a little more to it than just being beaten out by other players. Songbin himself even said that he's excited for the opportunity to play. His mentality had taken a hit being on the bench when all these other players that were spearheaded by Eric Ramsey joined the team. The last winter transfer window was big for Minnesota, and he's just, as they've transitioned, Songbin has found himself on the outs. I would argue not of his own doing, but rather a shift in how the organization is building their roster. That to me is the first thing to keep in mind, as opposed to just the numbers on the sheet. The other thing is, this is a player who we found out on Thursday's press conference that St. Louis has actually been targeting for quite some time. Songbin himself said that St. Louis has been interested in him since at least last summer, if not before. So this is a player who, when Lutz says an exciting attacking player, creativity in the final third, fits our system, this is a player he's been targeting for some time. Now, Songbin actually has played against St. Louis dating back to the 2023 season. So it's probably a case of you, at least in part, of seeing what he can do in person against you, in addition to just in the league, and wanting that type of a player on your team. St. Louis has been scouting him and trying to get him to join for at least a year. This is the third transfer window, reportedly, or apparently, as we hear from Songbin, that St. Louis has been interested, and they finally made it work. When you go after a player for that long, regardless of what their on-field performance is, with all of the changes to a club, the potential that you see, the profile that you have, and you're wanting to chase this player for so long, and you finally get him, that at least earns a level of excitement in what St. Louis saw in him. And as I told Brennan Weesey on the Big 550 KTRS earlier, that reminds me of a certain other few players that we know of from St. Louis. Thomas Totlin, Cedric Teuscher, Marcel Hartl, these players who we know St. Louis was interested in for at least a window or two prior to actually landing them. That kind of an impact, I think, is what I expect from Songbin, whether it's on the right midfield, right wing side, as a second striker, however he's able to be employed. But being a U22, now our fourth U22 after Chris Durkin, JGR, Falu Fall, and now Songbin, I think this is the level of excitement that I want to see going into the back half of 2025, regardless of if we have the playoffs to play for. Songbin finishing this out, potentially picking up an option if things go well. That's a good place to build a roster when you're talking about a player that we've been missing a key piece in his pace and his speed, able to get in behind the lines, likely on the right side. So, Stu, I share the excitement, and I think there's a lot to look forward to. This is the most exciting signing that I think has the most immediate potential for an impact, because Songbin is in training this week, and David Critchley had said he should be a candidate to be available this weekend. Whether or not he starts, we have yet to see. Critchley obviously wasn't going to give that away, but Songbin was available to talk, like I mentioned, on Thursday. The club usually doesn't do that unless there's either a big name signing like Songbin was, or they're expected to start. And we may have a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B. We'll have to wait to see. The other bit that we had from Minnesota United is Devin Padelford. Devin Padelford is a little bit of an interesting story. He is a 22-year-old defender, left back, natural left-footed, acquired by St. Louis on loan through the end of the year. And as part of this deal, Minnesota United will receive City's natural third-round pick in the 2026 MLS Super Draft. Not a whole lot of loss to me in this one. The third-round pick of this past season was Colin Welsh, the goalkeeper for City 2, who is arguably second on the depth chart goalkeeper at City 2. Third-round Super Draft pick isn't the most valuable thing in the world. It's not even the slightly most valuable thing. It's one of the most expendable possible things you could trade in MLS. So when you hear a third-round pick, don't think NFL third-round pick. Think toss-away pick that you throw in to just make a receiving party happy in some way. And that's what this was. But what we get is a player with a lot of potential that has that profile of a left back that we really want. Lutz Pfannenstiel said, Devin is a young player who has already shown maturity and potential at the MLS level, having been Minnesota's first homegrown player out of the club's academy in 2022. Lutz says his ability to get forward from the left side, combined with his defensive instincts, will provide us with another option as we push through the end of the season. And I think that's what this is, a player on loan who is essentially on trial to see if we want to purchase him and give him a longer shot, a bigger look as a possible solution to left back. Stu, I'm not going to make you go into our history at left back, but what do you think about this Padelford move, and how does it line up with other options that we currently have at left back with Jay Reed and Haziel Orozco?
I think it's, like you said, it's a prove it situation. And with Orozco and Reed, all three of those guys need to be fighting. There's going to be a lot of roster turnover in the end of this window, probably not this window, but certainly over the winter. And these guys have to fight. They have to fight for that spot, and any of them could end up with it. If Padelford impresses, it wouldn't surprise me if we pay the fee, make him permanent, and who knows, maybe we ended up swapping future left backs for years and years between these two squads.
I would actually quite enjoy a starting 11 this weekend of Anthony Marcanic for Minnesota and then Devin Padelford for St. Louis. I think the juxtaposition would be pretty striking on that. And yeah, the latest in a long line of attempts at left back. The thing about Padelford is not just his youthfulness, the 22-year-old, but it said in the press release during the 2024 season, he established himself as a regular in Minnesota's lineup. 24 appearances, 19 starts. First MLS assist on April 1st against SKC. He made his first team debut back in 2023. Well, I'll mention it here in a little bit, but he has a history against St. Louis as well. And he scored his first professional goal July 8th in 2023 against Austin. So we have him on loan through the end of the year in exchange for our third round super draft pick next year. There's a lot that we'll probably be talking about in the upcoming weeks for Padelford, but right now, as we sit on the transfer window opening here and looking ahead to Minnesota United, both Songbin Jong and Devin Padelford will be available for selection per David Critchley's use of them and kind of how he sees the full match day roster shaking out, which is a topic for conversation that we're going to get to here in a little while. But the last few things, because we do actually have a few more transfer window related things to discuss. But while we do that, I'm going to say you're listening to Flyover Footy on the Big 550 KTRS. And if you're listening to us on the Big 550 KTRS, tune into our podcast where we will be breaking down much more of the city roster itself, some questions, some profiles, looking top to bottom on that with all of these rumors, reports, news, and everything that goes into this. But the last big thing that happened this week isn't an official headline or an official news article, but it is just a report. And it has driven a lot of conversation in the city fan base over the past few days. It is that Jacques Klouse has reportedly garnered interest from Club Leon in Liga MX. This was reported first by Paco Montes on Twitter, and it has morphed as the week has progressed. If translations hold with this, Paco initially reported that the negotiations of between Club Leon and City both contain both player and institutions agreeing. So there seemed to be some kind of agreement reached based on his first tweet that came out on Wednesday. By Thursday, we had a little bit of a follow-up that's saying the negotiations between Club Leon and City for Klouse continue, but there are other alternatives. There may have been some complications to the negotiations. What these complications are, we don't know yet, but there seems to be some roadblocks in negotiations. And when this happens to me, my first instinct is that St. Louis's asking price became too high or something that Club Leon wanted to negotiate down a little bit. And I enjoyed seeing this. There is an argument to be made a lot of different ways on whether this would be a good thing for City, whether we would use this to find another player in lieu of Klouse now in the winter. A lot of conversations. But ultimately, St. Louis holds all the cards. They don't need to sell Klouse. They have him through the end of this year with an option for next year that would bring him down to be a TAM level player. They could entertain offers, which is probably what this is at the very least, is entertaining and trying to ascertain maybe what his market value is. If Club Leon is the first club that has approached Klouse or approached City for Klouse, this is an opportunity to engage in negotiations and see what the asking price would be, see what Klause's market value would be. If that's the case, then I think full credit to City for entertaining the conversation. And this is a report that came out from the Club Leon side. Remember what I always say about transfer windows, transfer rumors, and any conversation relating to the transfer market. If something is reported, if something is leaked, it usually has a reason for getting out. And coming from the Club Leon side, now we have out that City and Club Leon are discussing a possible transfer of Klouse. What that is intended to do is anybody's guess, and there's always an angle for all of these things. But at the very least, this seems like a reputable report just because Paco Montes has been a reputable source in the past, works for Fox down in Mexico. This isn't a reporter who would just talk to somebody's second cousin twice removed and then get a story out there. So Stu, what do you make of this entire saga regarding Klouse?
I hope he doesn't go. My gut says we're going to keep him through the season. Like you said, he's valuable, but you also never know if, the agent is agitating for a move or if the player behind the scenes, there's a lot of reasons. He's been with the club now since 2022. So he's spent quite a bit of time here. He may love it here, but he may see his chance to move on. Lyon may offer him a higher salary. There's a lot of questions here.
Yeah.
I hope he stays personally because, like you said, he could be bought down as a TAM player next year, and I think he's a very valuable player in that role, and we'll get a lot of value out of him scoring. It's just wait and see. It's such a bottled answer, but wait and see, and this could change, and many other teams could get involved by the end of this.
And this is just the beginning of our transfer window. So we'll see what happens in the coming days, whether or not this has any legs to it. It seems like with this complication and the immediate, not backtrack, but the immediate correction or getting that out there, that this may have a little bigger of a bump in the road than we first thought. So more to come as we know it. Follow Flyover Footy on all the socials to find out the latest. And we'll see where this goes, because it would be a massive loss. And like I said, there's nobody on the roster right now that can replace Klouse, bar none. Like, there's just no other way to put it. You can put a player at the 9 position, but they profile vastly different no matter who it is, whether it's Betcher, Toy Shirt, Songbin, or even Caden Glover or somebody. Vastly, there's no replacement for Klouse on our roster currently. So if you sell him, you either reinvest it with an intention to replace him, or you're just having to switch things up drastically in how our system operates. And that probably is a conversation related to what our performance right now is and what the goals for St. Louis are, which we're going to touch a little bit more in the wind down. The only other big news that happened this week is an official outgoing of sorts, and that's the fact that City finally made official the transfer of midfielder Jabulu Blom to the Vietnamese team, Jean Nam Dinh. And I apologize profusely for not getting that right, but it is a team in the Vietnamese V-League 1, their first division, and they're the 24-25 champions in that league. This is something that the Vietnamese side made official or announced the other day, but City has just finalized it on their end, and so they announced it with Lutz Pfannenstiel saying, "We want to thank Jabulu for his time here. His contributions during our inaugural season were an integral part of the club's early success, and we wish him success in his new adventure." Stu, for me, this is cleanup. We knew Jabulu Blom wasn't coming back to St. Louis ever since his dust up with John Hackworth. I don't know if you want to call it a dust up. I want to call it a dust up because he refused to stand with his teammates during the FC Suarez PKs in Leagues Cup, and Hackworth had words for him during that. Ever since then, he hasn't appeared for City. He was on loan, and he was never in City's plans. So as good as he was at times in 23 especially, and as valued as he was initially, being called the missing puzzle piece by Lutz when he first signed him in December of 2022, the promise was never fully realized consistently. He never fully acclimated. He had issues with nutrition. He had issues with the heat, and it just never came full circle to where we wanted it to be. What are your thoughts on this Blom official transfer?
Yeah, I mean, it was a long time coming. I don't think any of us expected to see him back in a City kit ever again. And all the love for the guy. He played hard in 2023. He was part of that magical season. We'll always have his amazing goal of the week against Minnesota United. That was a lot of fun. So we had good times with Blum, and we'll try to remember those, and best to forget the bad times. And best of luck to him to his next chapter. And I mean, I think he thought St. Louis was pretty hot and miserable. So I don't know what the temperature's like there in that city in Vietnam, but probably a little more hot and humid than here.
Yeah, absolutely. Some good news on the City end, though, as we round down this look at the transfer window. We have Falou Fall, and he has yet to arrive, so we know his signing is official. He hasn't joined the club. He was announced on July 15th, but he is coming as another reinforcement, that final U22 or the third U22, depending on how you want to look at that. Haziel Orozco signed to a first-team deal on the supplemental roster. Other things that have happened in this window that are indirectly related to City are Isak Jensen and AZ Jackson were sold to other clubs, which nets City some money from a sell-on clause. But at the end of the day, we really have no outgoings yet. Selmer Pedro, Jabulu Blom, they were off roster. Nukvi Thorson was off roster on loan. So none of those three really were on the 2025 roster. Giannis Horn is the only player, I think, Stu, that we were talking about that is technically an outgoing because we ended his loan. We chose not to pick up his purchase option and we let him go. He's now playing in Austria. He scored a goal today. He scored a goal on Thursday. So that's awesome for him. But that's the other big thing is that there really haven't been any other outgoings. And so because of that, our roster is almost full up. Thanks are, I don't know how you want to word it. Thanks might not be the right way to put it, but thanks to Rasmus Alm's season-ending injury designation, we actually do have one remaining senior roster slot open as of July 24th when the transfer window opened. So Alm's designation makes one open senior slot. The supplemental roster is full. With all these moves, Stu, any final words on bringing in Songbin in the attack, bringing in Padelford, Fall, Orozco on the defense, and that being kind of what we have for our transfer window so far?
Well, so far, keywords so far. I think there'll be more outgoings and more incomings before the window closes. But yeah, it might not be the sexiest start to the window. I think it's pretty exciting, but a U22 center back, reserve team player on loan, and a guy who wasn't lighting up the league. But all these guys have potential, and the club believes in them, and we've hit on some guys, and some haven't lived up to expectations. But I love this stuff. The transfer window is fun because you all these guys you've never heard of, unlike other sports where you have prospects and you can follow them through all levels or in youth sports or whatever. Most of these guys fans will never have heard of. I don't even know how. I didn't hear about Follow Fall before. I'm sure there are people who have and knew about him, but it's fun to dig into and research these guys in hindsight.
And I do have a correction to make. I was just looking at my my roster profile, and I was joking before we went on the air that I missed the details on my numbers, and because of that, I actually have a correction. We are full up on our roster. We have 20 senior roster slots filled besides Rasmus Alm, and we have 10 supplemental rosters filled. So our roster is full. So without any more outgoings, we can't bring anybody else in. I'm just going to list them real quick because I'll talk about them in our wind down. So tune in for that. But the first few players, we have Marcel Hartl and Klouse as our DPs. We have Chris Durkin, JGR, Songbin, and Falu Fall as our U22s. That's 6 players. We have Roman Berkey, Henry Kessler, Edu Leuven, Joachim Nilsson, Thomas Ostrak, and Cedric Toyshert as TAM level players. That's 6 more, brings it up to 12. Then we have Alfredo Morales, Kyle Hebert, Timo Baumgartel, Simon Betcher, Thomas Totlin, Celio Pompeu, Jean De Silva, and Conrad Wallem as the additional players. And so, that's it. We have 20 players by my math. Stu, does that sound about right to you?
Yeah, sorry, I had muted mic there for a split second while I took a drink of water. No, that sounds about right with the outgoings, because we've had a lot of talks internally about that supplemental spot, and if there was a player off it who would maybe want to transfer to at some point. So that sounds correct to me.
Yeah. So right now, that's what we have to deal with. What Lutz Fenestiel has to deal with, and so that's why the discussion of outgoings is so important right now. With 10 supplemental slots being taken by Josh Yarrow, Ben Lunt, Caden Glover, Jaden Reed, Akil Watts, Joey Zielinski, Christian Oliveras, Michael Venzel, Haziel Orozco, and Devin Padelford. That's another 10. So we'll talk about that a little bit more when we get to our lineup projections here in a bit. But now you have an idea of all of the incomings that City has had, the very few outgoings, and everything else that gets you caught up so far on this transfer window as it officially opens on Thursday, July 24th. With that said, Stu, let's pivot directly into our Minnesota United preview, and we will be brief on this, but we'll get everything you need to know about these two teams heading into this match. The head-to-head history of it is pretty one-sided. Minnesota has won 5 of 6, with City's only win coming in that match that we just talked about a little bit ago, September 23rd, 2023, with Jabulu Blom scoring a world-leave goal. And ironically, in that match, Songbin Jeong started the game for Minnesota, and Devin Padelford subbed in at 78. So that has a little more history now, that match in 2023, that away match to Minnesota, than we had even previously thought. Other notable games in this series now are October 19th, 2024, in which Songbin Jeong scored a brace against St. Louis City en route to Minnesota United's 4-1 victory. Other than that, City's lost both home matches they've played, 1-0 and 3-1. So we're not just looking for a win. We're looking for a little bit of revenge, a little bit of trying to make this an actual rivalry, an actual two-sided matchup, because so far it's been pretty one-sided. And unfortunately, the team's form going into this doesn't lend itself to expect an end to that Minnesota dominance anytime soon. Minnesota sits third in the West with an 11-5-8 record on 41 points in 24 matches. They have 40 goals scored, 27 goals against, and a plus 13 goal differential. They have fewer losses at home than they do away. This is a team that is 5-2-5 away, and they have fewer losses away than they do at home. They're well performing, pretty even keeled on both sides. 5-2-5 away, 6-3-3 at home. Their last three matches: a 1-1 draw at Portland, a 1-0 loss against LAFC at home, and a 4-1 win against San Jose at home. Since the last time they played St. Louis, because these two teams are fairly familiar with each other this year, having played each other twice, though obviously under different circumstances, with Olaf Melberg as having been the head coach for St. Louis at that time. Since playing St. Louis, Minnesota is 4-2-4 in MLS play. They haven't allowed more than 2 goals against since April 26th against Vancouver, and 6 out of their last 11 matches, they've scored 2 or more. So this is a team that has been in pretty good form as it relates to allowing few goals and scoring at least 2 goals per game. They have only had one time this year where they've gone winless in more than 2 straight. They had 2 draws and a loss back in April. And like I said, they've gone winless in their last 2. So Minnesota is fighting to make sure that they don't add a second 3-game winless streak to their season. And honestly, we're all a little bit jealous on the St. Louis side that they only have one streak like that, having gone 3 matches winless. That's their longest winless streak. So going into this, they are also a pretty healthy team. Hoyan Jung has a knee injury, and Wessel Spiel has a shoulder injury. Those were their availabilities from last weekend. But they have a combined 4 starts between these two in 24 matches. This amounts to a very healthy Minnesota United team. And we talked earlier about how Songbin was on the outs, wasn't seeing minutes, so his departure isn't taking a whole lot away from what their 2025 team is. The biggest stories I have here are that former teammates are going to be doing battle again with Songbin and Padelford against Anthony Marcanic as the presumed left back starter for St. Louis. Now, one of the things that I hope for is that because of the timing, Songbin and Padelford will have given some kind of tactical advantage to St. Louis. They have to have been talking. They have to have been offering a little bit of an insight into what Eric Ramsey's side has to offer. Maybe that's a little bit of a tactical advantage that David Critchley can use, because Minnesota has a ton of dangerous players. Tani Oluwaseyi, 9 goals, 7 assists, leads the team in both. Kelvin Yeboah, Anthony Marcanic, Robin Lode, Joaquin Pereira. They've got their 2 DPs in Yeboah and Pereira. And Anthony Marcanic, if you guys can believe this, Anthony Marcanic has 6 goals in MLS play, 8 total goals scored this season. He is 3rd on the team in goals, 4th on the team in goals and assists, and he's 1 goal behind Klouse this year. Stu, I don't know how this blows my mind to think about this comparison between Anthony Marcanic and Klouse as far as goal scoring goes. It's set pieces, right? It's headers. It's putting himself in the right positions. What do you make of this Minnesota team, and what's the vibe of the Loons fans? I think you're a little more plugged into that than I am.
Yeah, I think overall they're excited about their season. They've actually given up quite a few late goals, so that's something to keep an eye on their side. They gave up a goal late against Timbers, and they have against San Diego recently as well. I mean, if you put Klouse on this Loons team, I think he has a lot more goals than Marcanic does. So
that's fair.
Yeah, I mean, obviously prefer Klouse as an attacking player, but it's good to see Marcanic blossoming in a way. I just wish it would have been here. No, scoring's in the Marcanic blood. His brother Nick is now in Spain, and I had a brace in a friendly a couple weeks ago. So, yeah, no, it's going to be a homecoming, and hopefully Marcanic looks fondly upon St. Louis and does not score against us.
There's an article I'm going to reference here in just a little bit that I think speaks exactly to Anthony Marcanic scoring 6 goals this year. So stay tuned in just a minute for that. But I want to get to St. Louis and what we look like going into this match. You might not want to hear about it. You might know too much already. St. Louis is 14th in the West, a 4-13-6 record, 18 points in 23 matches with 23 goals scored, 38 goals against, and that's a minus 15 goal differential. We are 3-4-4 at home. So 3 of our 4 wins have come at home. But that's in 11 total matches. We're now 2-5-1 under David Critchley, with the last few matches being that 3-0 loss against FC Dallas, the 2-1 win against Portland, and the 1-0 loss to Houston. The trends are what they are. We're only 2 points ahead of the Galaxy and 3 points ahead of CF Montreal in the East for that wooden spoon, as Phil and Santi talked about on Fallout last weekend. Last week was our second worst offensive production under Critchley. We faced a low block FC Dallas team that may honestly be a bit reminiscent of what Minnesota United has to offer in a low possession, low block look where they're trying to frustrate us in tight spaces. This team is becoming a mixed bag. We've talked a lot about how Critchley has introduced a more dangerous attack, but has been so porous in the defense, and that hasn't come with a consistent balance. We found the balance against Portland, and I think that was a pretty good indication of what this team can be. But we haven't found consistency yet under Critchley with this system and this style, and that's concerning. The teams I mentioned, 2-5-1 under Critch, but they've had the advantage in expected goals and expected goals against in 4 of those 8. So we're now even. We're no longer ahead in that battle like we were a few games ago. And defensively, this was absolutely a step back after this last match. 4th time in Critchley's 8 games where City has allowed at least 3 goals, and it was their 4th time in his 8 games where we've allowed at least an XGA, an expected goals against, of more than 2. Teams typically outperform their expected goals, so this isn't the fact that we've had 3 or more versus 2 or more XGA. That's not surprising, but these are higher numbers than you ever want to be allowing on your defensive side. And City is now 1-10-0 when conceding first this season. We obviously didn't have a goal coming back last week, but 1-10-0 when conceding first becomes a major storyline. And that carries from Olaf into Critchley. So this is a problem with St. Louis. And it was a massive deal against Portland when we were able to come back. But 1-10-0 when conceding first is not sustainable. Now, on the good news, Stu, we do have a healthier roster. And this is going to lead into our starting 11 in a little bit. The only players that we believe are going to be out going into the weekend are Henry Kessler, Joachim Nilsson, and I believe there was one other. Michael Wenzel. Henry Kessler, Joachim Nilsson, and Michael Wenzel. Other than that, Chris Durkin is expected to come back. We have Alfredo Morales and Celio Pompeo expected to come back. Edu Leuven is supposed to be able to start and get a longer run out. And Timo Baumgartel remains good from his time, an extended period of time last weekend. So overall, good news as far as the health for St. Louis goes, with Songbin and Padelford sounding like they should be available for selection, though Critchley wouldn't commit to starting Songbin. But when you're looking at getting down to now Henry Kessler and Joachim Nilsson as your senior rosters out and Michael Wenzel as your supplemental roster out, that is much better than we have had in as long as I can remember in the 2025 season. So my biggest storylines for St. Louis going into this are, will Songbin start versus his former team out of the gates? And will Songbin and Padelford's insights offer a somewhat of a tactical advantage against Minnesota? And it's easier to say you have a tactical game plan that's the advantage versus being able to implement it. That's obviously been a problem for St. Louis this year, is implementing what they plan for. And then honestly, what look will we see after that horrendous performance against Dallas? Because Stu, before I get your thoughts on St. Louis going into this, the comments from Lutz Pfannenstiel this past weekend on KMOX are just seared into my mind, thinking of him saying, we have a large number of players who are on options. They should be smart enough to know they're playing for their contracts. They're playing for their future. But the way we performed yesterday, he was talking on Sunday, the way we performed yesterday was a clear sign these players don't want to be here. He went on to say it was not good enough. There will be some hard conversations this week, mentioning it was a disgrace after the first goal, no energy, no fight, simply not good enough. And he went on to say, we need to change. It will be a busy July transfer window again, but looking ahead, the players need to understand this is professional sports. We are here to win. We are not here to stand around and jog around, and don't put the work rate in and don't sprint. Where do you go from here, Stu, if you're St. Louis, and what are you expecting from this club?
I mean, you look at some of the guys who are on on that supplemental roster who have options that would be coming off. I mean, you have guys like Lund, Oliveras, obviously Reed, Akil Watts, Wenzel, Yarrow, and Zielinski. I mean, we don't know who exactly Lutz was talking about, but it's true. I mean, entirely true. There's no time to pull punches, and I'm glad he didn't pull punches. And I think Lutz is also aware that it's not just the players whose jobs are on the line, but also the front office have to start bringing success. And whether it's, this season's already lost, but we have to set the foundation for next season. And we can't end this season on a failure. And I think Lutz knows that. Lutz, oh my God. Lutz knows that. And he's speaking out in that fashion. He's driven to speak out and drive the players. Critchley, I'm sure, is feeling pressure as well, even though he's, doesn't have that permanent tag. So, yeah.
But at the same time, I think Critchley is feeling that pressure too, because he's playing for his own job. He knows that the performance of the team, it directly relates to his opportunity.
And not just his opportunity here in St. Louis. If he's not hired on as a permanent manager here in St. Louis, what he does here could impress teams. RSL could sack their manager next April, and they think, oh, Critchley's a up and coming guy, and he goes and he manages in RSL or Colorado or Cincinnati if they start the season off with 10 losses and sack Noonan. Who knows? But he is auditioning for a future head coaching role in St. Louis or somewhere else in MLS.
Couldn't agree more. Absolutely. So I want to give a little bit more detail on this Minnesota team that we're expecting to play, what style they're expecting to play, and what we can expect from them, because so much seems to be riding on this. If July is going to be a busy transfer month, a busy transfer window beyond what we've already done, if Lutz is getting so fed up with some of the players' performances and nobody's spot on the roster is safe, then you can almost, to me, this isn't about whose contracts are expiring. This is about what kind of performances you're seeing week in and week out and who deserves to remain wearing the city badge. You might have a contract expiry at the end of the season, and you might sit the bench for the rest of the year because we don't have a buyer for you because you're so underperforming. But if you have a contract that goes until 2026 and you're still doing this kind of these antics, and you're not playing the way that Lutz and that Critchley need you to play and the fans expect you to play, then you might just as well be sold for less than your market value just to get rid of you. I mean, that's what I take away from these kinds of significant comments. This absolute disaster class of a performance against FC Dallas is a bit of a continuing trend, and you have your ups and downs, but if you have more downs than ups, that becomes the trend. And so I think this Minnesota team is a dangerous team again for St. Louis because they play much more similar to FC Dallas, a team that beat us 3-0, than they play like Portland, where we were able to find a way to win. So looking a little bit deeper into this Minnesota team as we round out this episode on the Big 550 KTRS previewing Minnesota, we can expect them to play with wingbacks. We can expect them to play in a 5-4-1 formation or a 5-3-2. They've used both this season, depending on how they want to look up top. But Minnesota is one of the most dynamic attacking teams in Major League Soccer. They excel at capitalizing on turnovers, building play from the back. They'll start with their center back, Jefferson Diaz. Their ability to transition quickly from defense to attack, oftentimes, in that mid to low block, that's been a hallmark. There's been an emphasis on exploiting spaces in the opponent's defensive third, something that City allowed Dallas, or at least they weren't able to prevent Dallas from doing. So that continues this issue. Other strengths Minnesota has is the attacking versatility. They've got Tani Oluwasani. They've got Anthony Marcanic. They've got lots of players that have scored multiple goals, 8, 6, like they're multiple goal scoring threats on this team. They have a coach in Eric Ramsey who has honed his time at Chelsea and Manchester United. He's got a progressive style that maximizes the squad's potential very well. But if I had to point to one thing that this team has been doing extremely well, I would just point to a Guardian article, theguardian.com. Everybody's familiar with The Guardian. They featured Minnesota United here just a couple of weeks ago, or last week maybe even, in how adept Minnesota is at set pieces, both in free kicks and long throw-ins. They talked about an analysis by Soccerment that highlighted Minnesota's exceptional use of deep free kicks and long throw-ins. The fact that Minnesota leads all professional men's teams in the top 30 leagues globally in deep free kicks and long throw-ins. Set piece domination by Minnesota isn't just the best in Major League Soccer. It's a global phenomenon that's been picked up by a worldwide audience here. Their league-leading proficiency in these deep free kicks and long throw-ins is a big part of their offense. So much so that I'm going to read a few excerpts from this article. And Anthony Marcanic was a big piece of this, saying all of the guys get really excited about set pieces, especially myself, after Marcanic actually scored one. He told Michael Boxall, I love when he has the ball for throw-ins and stuff. He gets so excited. And the Guardian noted that Minnesota is chucking more balls into the box than any other MLS side in at least a decade. Long throws might not even be the Loons' most distinctive set piece routine. They borrowed a page from Sean Dyke's playbook by bringing their goalkeeper up to wallop free kicks into the opposition's box from around the halfway line. These deep free kicks, they're not an Edu Leuven type person or a Marcel Hartl type person playing. That would be akin to bringing Roman Berkey to the halfway line and having him send in free kicks into the box as just these long set pieces. Minnesota is so good at this that they just make this is why Anthony Marcanic has 6 goals scored in Major League Soccer. This is why Marcanic has been able to get all these goals scored. Deep free kicks have the tactical variety, but every set piece starts from principles that Ramsey rattles off like a pop quiz, they said. Do you have the right number of players in the contact area? Is the thrower or the set piece taker able to, with a degree of accuracy, put the ball into a certain spot? So they've got a clinical nature to this. You add it all up, and the value of Minnesota's aggressive set pieces is astonishing, as the Guardian says. 10 goals within 45 seconds of a long throw or deep free kick represent nearly a third of the team's season total of goals. Their entire squad earns about, this is a funny concept, their entire squad earns about half of Lionel Messi's salary. Minnesota's perched above Miami in the Supporter Shield. This is Minnesota being put on a global stage for how well they are able to accomplish goals from deep free kicks and from throw-ins. The point being, if St. Louis isn't able to prevent Minnesota from getting these opportunities, they're going to have a tough time stopping them, because Minnesota shows that if they just get a few of these opportunities, they're going to convert. Throw-ins, deep free kicks, that's the thing to watch out for from this Minnesota United team. A lot of the other aspects and stats, these two teams aren't too dissimilar from things like progressive carries, progressive passes. Minnesota averages the fewest touches on the ball per game by far. 50 lower touches per game than Dallas, 90 lower than St. Louis. They're going to be the lowest in a lot of these metrics, these statistical categories, but they're effective at creating chances because of things like these free kicks and throw-ins. They use a different philosophy to have these competitive advantages. They're not looking to win the field tilt battle. They're looking to give the ball to St. Louis. They're looking to drop back, hit you on the counter, and then use these dead ball opportunities. It's so distinctive. It's so unique. And I think it could frustrate St. Louis and St. Louis fans a lot this week. But Stu, what do you have to say as we round out this look at Minnesota? Any other thoughts on Minnesota or even St. Louis going into this?
Oh man, their crest is amazing. But can St. Louis fans get more frustrated than we already are? Is that possible? I don't know.
Ooh. I don't know. I don't think we want to know the answer to that question.
Well, hopefully we won't find out on Saturday. No, they're a good team. They have exciting teams. They always play us hard, and they one thing to keep an eye out on is Joaquin Pereira. He is connected with possibly a move to Boca Juniors. That came out today. So if he does not travel to St. Louis, that would definitely be a big boon for us. So he's one to keep an eye out for. If he doesn't travel, that means he's probably gone. And it's obviously too early for them to bring in a replacement DP. So we might fall in that little bit of sweet spot of transfer window luck.
That's a good shout out. That's something absolutely to watch. Joaquin Pereira, whether he travels to St. Louis, and keep an eye out for the news over the weekend heading into St. Louis. The last few questions I have, and these are just rhetorical questions to think about as you go into the match. Can we trust City to break down this low block? Critchley talked on Thursday at the press conference about it. He knows that's a potentiality that they're going to face. They've watched the film against FC Dallas. He says they have a plan for how to approach it. Can they implement it is the biggest thing. You can have the tactical plan. You can study and say all the right things in the film session, but will City actually be able to implement it properly to a point where they can score 1 or 2 goals at least against Minnesota? And to that end, can a longer appearance by Edu Leuven help us control the midfield better? This is one of the areas that Minnesota is seen as having a weakness, is their midfield area. So can Edu Leuven help? The departure of Will Trapp last year, Song Bin in the depth. Minnesota doesn't have the strongest midfield with Robin Lod kind of carrying the load there. Lod carrying the load. But Edu Leuven should get a longer run out. So what can that do to really change how City looks for longer portions of the game? Mention the factors of Song Bin and Devin Padelford. What can City also do to neutralize these free kicks, these dead ball opportunities? Alex Langer, I'm sure, has been well-versed in what Minnesota has done to gain this advantage. And he's often cited as the set piece coach, the goalkeeper coach. He's cited as the offensive nature. City themselves coming up with strong set piece corner kick goals, goal plays. And not just the City on the attack, but the defensive side, like we mentioned, is going to be probably even more important than City scoring from their own free kick. So what can City do to neutralize this? What will their own looks be? That's something to keep in mind and to watch out for, is when Minnesota gets these long, deep free kicks, don't take any of them for granted. Don't say, oh, that ball's near the midline, and pay attention to who's taking the kick. Do they bring Dane St. Clair up to take the kick, their goalkeeper, or do they have one of their other players? Because if they bring St. Clair up, they're gaining an extra player opportunity in the box, and that's where they get dangerous. So things to watch out for on the dead pieces, or the dead ball opportunities for Minnesota. Stu, as we finish this, let's go with our starting 11s and discuss a little bit of the roster, and then we'll say good night to everybody in advance of this Minnesota game. I'll start us off. And because of Lutz's comments, this whole thing could be blown up. You could have players not appearing on the roster who I have in the starting 11. This could be one of the more difficult games to predict as far as the starting 11, just because of how awful we performed against FC Dallas and the critical comments that Lutz had to make after that game. But I'm going to go with a backline of Roman Berkey, Haziel Orozco, Timo Baumgartel, Josh Yarrow, and Thomas Totland. I don't necessarily want Josh Yarrow in my lineup, but I don't know what other option we have other than maybe Hebert or JGR. And I just don't know the propensity of Critchley. He doesn't seem to be a Hebert guy, that's for sure. And I don't know why JGR hasn't been starting, other than the fact that he was injured or did not appear. I will say one thing, and I hope he doesn't mind me bringing this up. Santi mentioned that he asked to interview JGR at training on Wednesday, and was told that he wasn't sure if JGR would be at training. We know that JGR was not appearing in the last little while for non-injury related things. So JGR could be an option to be sent out. That the tea leaves could be there. The JGR might be on his way out on loan or some other deal. That could be a possibility of why we haven't been seeing him in games lately. And I know I've just derailed my starting 11, but I had to mention that really quick. So to recap, Roman Berkey, Haziel Orozco, Timo Baumgartel, Josh Yarrow, Thomas Totland. And my midfield is Edu Leuven and Tomas Ostrak. I don't think Chris Durkin's ready to start yet, so I've got Ostrak there with Leuven. My attack, I'd like to see Conrad Wallem, Marcel Hartl, Song Bin Jong, and Klouse. I'm pretty dead set on this attack. I really want to see this attack with Wallem and Song Bin on the left and right, Hartl in the middle, and then Klouse up top. I think that provides our best attacking. And just to give an idea of the bench that we could have if we do this, you would have Ben Lunt on the bench, obviously, Simon Betcher, Jean De Silva, Celio Pompeu, and Cedric Toyshirt. That's 4 attacking options on the bench, much more than we've had in previous games. You also have Chris Durkin and Alfredo Morales as central midfield options. Kyle Hebert and JGR could be the other 2 that round out this matchday roster. I didn't even mention Joey Zielinski, Jay Reed, or Akil Watts. You start to, and this is where I mentioned at the very beginning of the show, you start to get some of these senior roster players healthy. You don't need the supplemental roster players as much. You don't see guys like Zielinski, Reed, or Watts, or Caden Glover, like we haven't seen him in the entire season. Those kinds of players on the supplemental roster, they're not meant to be every match players. You're not meant to feature Akil Watts on the matchday roster every single week. He's meant to be a plug and play, fill in for somebody who's either hurt or needs a rest. That's what the supplemental roster is supposed to do. It's supposed to supplement the senior roster. Our injuries have necessitated a bigger role, which is not what is the roster is designed to do. Now we're seeing a little bit of a shift to that point where you're starting to see some of the players that we are much more familiar with, like lately of Reed and Zielinski, but especially Akil Watts. They might not even make the matchday roster because we have healthy senior roster players. Stu, what's your 11 look like?
Yeah, my 11's pretty close to yours. I have only a couple differences there because I would like to see Sengbin start, but we'll get to that. Berkey, Orozco, Baumgartel, Yarrow, Totland, backline. I just have a feeling Durkin's going to start. Maybe keep Ostrak on the bench to spell Leuven later on in the match. Wallum and Sengbin on left and right, or vice versa. Hartle and Klouse. I'm really hoping we see Wallum out there and not Toykert, but I have a feeling we might see Toykert instead.
I struggle with where Toykert fits into this lineup right now. I just, with Hartle at the 10, with Klouse up top, and not running a 4-4-2, 4-2-3-1, he's not best utilized. And so I'm struggling with that right now. Score predictions, Stu. I've got a 2-2 as my hopeful prediction. I haven't seen anything that gives me reason to believe that we'd be able to break down Minnesota. Third in the West. They are a perennially good team this year. They didn't lose anybody in the Songbin and Padelford deals that has been of value to them in 2025. And if Pereira goes, then that might be a big loss. But otherwise, this is a very strong team coming into St. Louis. And I'm struggling with finding ways that we have proven in the past that we're capable of beating this type of a team to say that we'd be able to beat them this weekend.
Yeah, I'm gonna go and just be the eternal optimist that I am, of course, and say 2-1 St. Louis City over Minnesota United with the Sengbin brace. Just
I'll take you being the eternal optimist. That's true.
Full
And
gas,
Songbin brace. Songbin brace.
Just go bold.
Might as well brace for brace. Let's do it. I love that kind of story, Brooke. I'd be ecstatic to be talking on Fallout this weekend about a Songbin brace scoring 4 goals in this matchup between these two teams. That'd be absolutely phenomenal. So on that note, we will bid you adieu and thank you for joining us on the Big 550 KTRS for the preview of Minnesota and a look at the transfer window opening. Stay tuned for the game if you're listening to us on the radio. But if you're inclined, tune into our podcast where we'll have our wind down, looking a little bit more at the roster, answering some questions, and going deep into the transfer window itself. So for Stuart Holgren, my name is Matt Baker. Thank you for joining us, and go City. Oh, Stu, you know what? I completely spaced on that. Here, I'm gonna re-bring us in. I messed up. This is my fault. I messed up on this.
Did we not record the last 2 hours?
I even have it on our notes, and I skipped it so we could include it at the end. I'm so frustrated myself. Okay, I'm gonna bring us back in. I'm gonna edit this part out for the podcast so we make sure to include it in the pod and on the radio, because we went way over. So I've got plenty of editing to do, but we need to get this part in. I'm gonna let you talk about it, Stu. Okay. You got it pulled up?
Which one are you talking about exactly?
The U15s.
Oh, yeah. No, I haven't pulled up.
All right, here we go. Hang on. This is the gross sausage being made part of how I do this sometimes. But sometimes I just forget it and I don't include it. And I'm not going to make that same mistake because these kids deserve the shout out. But before we go, Stu, I want you to tell us about some really exciting news, because I don't want to really end it on the idea of us drawing or of looking at Minnesota as a difficult match ahead. I want to end on a really, really bright note. So we had some exciting news this week from our academy on the U15 side. So tell us all about the St. Louis City Academy U15 Boys National, or the U.S. U15 Boys National Team as it relates to St. Louis City.
Yeah, so defender Owen Jorgensen and forward Blake Wilson both got called up to the US U15 Boys National Team for the 2025 CONCACAF Boys U15 Championship. They've both been called up before, but there's a very talented 2010 crew of players with the St. Louis City roster academy. One other academy call out on that same U15 team was Edison Niles was named the 2024-2025 U15 MLS Next MVP 8 days ago, back when they had the All-Star game. But he scored 31 goals over the course of the season. So 3 very, very talented young players who are all getting national team attention.
And Niles was the MLS Next MVP, as we talked about last week. So there's a lot of excitement for him. Jorgensen's 6th call up with the U15s. He started 2 friendlies in May, and then it was Wilson's 4th appearance with the U15s, having joined Jorgensen in May's training camp in Argentina. During this past season, Wilson tallied 14 goals, including what City said a strike against LAFC in the U15's 4-2 win in the 2025 Generation Adidas Cup. The tournament itself. So these guys are going to be going to Alajuela, Costa Rica, for the upcoming 2025 CONCACAF Boys U15 Championship. The tournament goes from August 2nd through the 10th, with the U.S. in League A, Group B. So we'll be following that in the next couple of weeks. Exciting stuff. And congratulations to Owen and to Blake. This is fantastic for their development, and to continue to see them picked over and over again. That's how you build the pedigree. That's how you build the resume. And that's how you continue to grow through the ranks of the U.S. youth national team on a hopeful trajectory to the men's national team. But it's way too early, admittedly, to be talking about that. But congratulations to Owen and Blake. And we wish you guys the best in this tournament. Stu, that's it for us on Flyover Footy on the Big 550 KTRS. If you're still listening to us, thank you so much. And we hope you enjoy the Minnesota United game, and tune into our podcast for the wind down, where we will be diving into the roster breakdown of St. Louis City a little bit more in depth and taking questions. We hope you enjoy this game against Minnesota United. Thank you for joining us on Flyover Footy, and we'll talk to you later. All right, we'll see what ends up happening to that ending. Might just hopefully we'll just be able to take option B there. That was something. I'm sorry I didn't get to that in the beginning. Our DM, Stu even DM'd me, to his credit, while I was going through Minnesota's style of play and their stats and all that stuff, and he's like, "Hey, don't forget about the U15s." So this one's on me for sure.
Yeah, I'm always in Matt's DMs, slipping in there.
Appreciate you sticking with us on that one. But Stu, can you stick around at all, or do you got to go?
I'm going to have to call it, unfortunately. And yeah, Sebastian in the chat had a great call out to Cornelius, who had Lorenzo Cornelius had an incredible assist in the MLS Next All-Star game. I guess it was 2 days ago. Yeah, he dribbled. He went down to he absolutely just juked that one player out of his socks inside the box. And he assisted, it's not an irony, but he assisted a Minnesota United Academy player. So there's a little bit of connection there. And your St. Louis connection outside of Anthony Marcanic for this week is Kippy Keller is on Minnesota United's supplemental roster. So
is he really?
Yeah. He also just had his birthday last week. So that was a couple fun little videos about him, and they asked if he had Midwestern cred or not. So it is interesting. People up north do not always look at St. Louis as Midwestern, so have to argue with them online profusely this weekend about that.
Well, I honestly had no idea about Kip Keller. I'm still shocked at that. Funny thing too, Anthony Marcanic is actually on the supplemental roster. So sometimes it doesn't matter what part of the roster you're on to be able to perform.
Yeah, and Kip's been hurt. He's kind of a tweener, but he was hurt for part of the season too. So
true.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Stu, have a good night. I'm going to go grab a drink and try to calm myself down from that little miscue before diving into this roster breakdown. So if you're joining us on the chat, drop any questions. I'm going to try to scroll back and see what you guys have been talking about and asking about as it relates to the roster. But if you have any questions, drop them in, and I promise I will get to them as we look at where we stand right now.
All right. Sounds great. Have a good day.
Thanks, Stu. All right, from the kids to at the beginning to the U15s at the end. Let's make this a fun show, guys. How about that? Change this little design here to that one. Okay. All right. If you have any questions on the chat, feel free to drop them in about our roster. Looking at anything, honestly, the usage, the players. If you have any questions about Klouse or other questions about outgoings, rumors you've heard, happy to look at those too. Welcome back to the wind down. Stu had to depart, but we wanted to make sure that before we dive into the roster itself, we also shout out Lorenzo Cornelius. Thank you, Sebastian Starrett, in the chat for making sure that we don't forget that in our discussion about the U15s in our academy and the products that we have, Lorenzo Cornelius from City 2 now, having graduated from the academy to City 2, appeared in the MLS Next All-Star game and had an absolutely dirty run. If you haven't seen this highlight, I know City had tweeted it out at one point. It's also on MLS Next's account. But during this All-Star game, absolutely filthy run down the end line, schooling at least one player, making him look silly, but having an assist also in that game. And as Stu pointed out, in between the wind down and our pod, the assist was to a Minnesota United Academy product. So a little bit of weird synergy there, I guess, ahead of our match. But also, Lorenzo Cornelius wanted to shout you out for an absolutely fantastic performance in the MLS Next All-Star game this past week. We don't have any other All-Star game stuff to talk about. We don't have anybody who featured, so we don't really care that I believe the final score was MLS All-Stars 3, Liga MX All-Stars 1. So it is what it is. But we are here in the wind down to mainly talk about the roster for St. Louis City. So I'm going to do that. If you're on the live stream, I'm going to show what I have put together as our up-to-date roster, club roster profile, with only one slight mistake that I made on this, which is to list our senior roster at 19 of 20. But I corrected myself on the main show that we have all of our roster slots taken. So if you're looking at this, you can count for yourself and keep me honest in the chat. But even with Rasmus Alm's season-ending injury, we look to be full up on this roster. The senior roster actually has from a using all of our roster slots and our available mechanisms in Major League Soccer, we are doing a pretty good job. 2 DPs and 4 U22s are signed to this roster. That's the max. We are in the U22 roster construction model, meaning we have availability of 2 DPs, 4 U22s, and we get $2 million in GAM. So we're making the best use of that as possible. On this image here, you can see the 2 DPs are in yellow, the 4 U22s are in green, and the TAM players that we have, which means they are making over league maximum, which if memory serves is like 751,000. Don't quote me on that, but I think that's this year. It raises every year based on the CBA. But every player in the TAM player list makes over the maximum senior salary for an individual player. That is a significant amount of players. 6 total TAM players to complement our 2 DPs and 4 U22s. I haven't looked at the numbers lately, especially with the transfer window opening, but I hope to do that later this season. We have one of the highest amount of like specialized roster slots taken for our roster. And so that's pretty cool, except for the performance factor of it. You look to some of these players, not just the performance on the field when they're healthy, but the injuries to some of them. And you look at specifically, Edu Leuven's missed a lot of time. Henry Kessler's missed a lot of time. Joachim Nilsson is still on our roster, still a TAM player, still being paid $1.2+ million. Tomas Ostrak has missed a lot of time. Cedric Toyshirt has been vastly underperforming. So yes, we've put together a roster that on paper looks pretty phenomenal, but we just haven't had the health and production of that to be able to realize it. And at the end of when we were looking at our starting 11s, the reason that I went into a possible bench on mine is to just look at if we had these players healthy, this supplemental roster down here that contains Josh Yarrow, Jay Reed, Akil Watts, Joey Zielinski, Michael Wenzel, Orozco and Padelford, we wouldn't need those kinds of players. They're not intended to be everyday starters. They're intended to be guys who, yeah, one or two might break through, and he might earn a roster or earn a starting 11 spot or match day roster slot. But these are supplements to your main roster. The senior roster is it's the main roster. Your highest paid players, your big ticket items. The supplemental isn't supposed to be every single game usage. You're not supposed to get 20 starts out of 24 matches by Akil Watts. It's not that, but you know what I mean. You're not supposed to need to play Josh Yarrow every single match. You're supposed to be able to have Joachim Nilsson, Henry Kessler, and Timo Baumgartel, Kyle Hebert being your top 4 options at center back who are on your senior roster. The senior roster players are supposed to be that deep. And we are starting to see that a little bit as far as who's available to play. This next match against Minnesota is probably our best showing of that on match day roster since maybe the entire season, if not the very beginning of the season. So that's something that's worth being excited about, but it ultimately goes back to the production. And Lutz's comments after the FC Dallas game of, yeah, you have these players that the club that he's put together, but the performance of them leaves a lot to be desired. And if you read in between what he said and the quotes that I said during the earlier part of the show, it's not the quality of the player, it's almost the effort that they're showing, the mentality. That seems to be what Lutz is really driving at, as opposed to Cedric Teuchert doesn't have the quality to play. Because I also remember back in the Olaf Melberg post-mortem press conference after he was fired, where Lutz had said the players didn't just forget how to play soccer. They didn't just lose their quality based on what they had shown at the end of last season. But now we have a much 2 times the sample size this season than we did at the end of last season for guys like Betcher and Teuchert, Hartl, and Horn at the time. But we're seeing a difference this year in the wrong way than we did last year. And so, yes, it is a valid question to me now of what is the quality of Cedric Teuchert? What is the quality of Simon Betcher to be able to do what we need them to do for consistent periods of time? We saw the 10 game amount last season, but we haven't seen anywhere near 10 games consistent this season like we did last season. So I don't want to call it a one-hit wonder from last year to us, but we need to see a return to that, or we're going to see more bench appearances for them, or that's how it should go if they're not performing. And I mentioned Betcher. He puts himself in good places. He's got good expected goals, but he hasn't finished anything. And so however we need to correct that, however we need to correct Cedric Teuchert finding his right spot and his most comfortable location as a second striker on the field centrally, either do it or don't put him in the game, because pigeonholing is not working. And that's one of the bigger takeaways for this roster as a whole. So looking at some of the questions in the chat, David McDonald asks, is Lutz still with the club at the start of the 2026 season? I do think he's still with the club at the start of the 2026 season. The succession planning question is a really good one because his contract goes through the end of 2026, and Diego Gigliani is not going anywhere as far as I know. So you do have to think, how many more transfer windows does Lutz get to really mold this team into a winning club? 2025 is essentially gone. The playoffs that Carolyn Kindle had said at the beginning were the goal of this team, not going to reach it. There's very little hope of going on the most monumental run in the history of Major League Soccer with this group of players in the current form that they're in. That I think at the last count, we would have had to gone 8 wins and 3 draws, or 9 wins straight off to be able to be in a position points per game to make the playoffs. I don't think that we're there. So that also leads me to think, not just is Lutz still with the club, but what is the goal of this club going into the back half of 2025? Because we're spending more. We're about, from my count, about $1 million more in total roster spend now than we were in May. So we've gotten guys off the books like Blom and Pedro, and Giannis Horn, and we've gotten the new signings in, and we're net about $1 million more in roster spend than we were back in May, that's significant, bringing in guys like Songbin. And that's not even counting what the salary is of Falou Fall and Haziel Orozco. Orozco is going to be around 80,000, but Falou Fall, he could be another significant add in salary. The team is spending. It's not a massive jump in spend from what it was from what it was last summer, but from bringing on Marcel Hartl as the most expensive player in his salary at 2.1 million on a free transfer to now signing Falou Fall for a reported $3 million and whatever his salary is going to be, for bringing in Songbin Zhang at a $1.6 million cash for trade, plus his absorbing the remainder of his $737,000 salary for this season. Those are significant amounts of money compared to what we had spent in previous transfer windows. So we're now seeing a significant progression window over window, or at least year over year, summer window over summer window, in what we're wanting and able and willing to spend for these players. So spending becomes less of a problem. The actual application of the spending, which is a direct responsibility of Lutz Van Steel and Diego Gigliani, that comes more into focus and more into question. Money spent does not equal wins in Major League Soccer, but you want to be competitive in the amount of money spent. We are now in the top half of overall roster spend in Major League Soccer. We're there on paper. We're just not there on the field, and that becomes putting Lutz and Diego in the crosshairs of spending wisely and spending on players who can remain healthy, can actually be consistent in their performances. And so far, we haven't hit on really either one of those two things. And without either one of those two things, you're not going to have any success. So I think Lutz gets probably until the end of his contract, because you could argue that if all these players were healthy, then you would have better options, but we're now starting to see that. Maybe the back half of 2025 is going to be where we see that come to fruition, where we have a healthy team. Now we get a good chance to see what kind of a team we have when we're fully healthy. It's also still David Critchley trying out for the full-time job, trying to earn that. So beginning of the 2026 season, I do see him there. I don't know. I can't come up with massive arguments on why we would want to just dismiss Lutz ahead of the 26 season, ahead of the winter transfer window, because that's a big deal. Getting rid of your sporting director, and that's organizational policy shifting type decisions. Like that has to have succession planning. You can't dismiss your sporting director and then go 5 months without a leader at the top of the sporting department. And like you did with the head coach last year, you can't have an interim sporting director. I don't know that Diego does not have the experience to be a sporting director. He has the experience in managing the business side. He has the managerial experience in a lot of ways. He doesn't have sporting recruitment experience. And so to have him absorb that responsibility, I don't think you would gain anything by dismissing Lutz and having Diego absorb those responsibilities versus having Lutz ride out his contract at the very least. So that's where I stand on, is Lutz still with the club at the start of 2026? Brett Stillman asked, why doesn't the team seem to be pursuing a 6? That, I think the answer to that is, if all of our current central midfielders were healthy, the team is happy with who we have in the midfield. And by all of them being healthy, I mean Edu Leuven, Chris Durkin, Tomas Ostrak, Conrad Wallem, Alfredo Morales, and Jake Girdwood-Reich. I think that's it for the central midfielders. You have Akil Watts there too, but I've named 6 players. So of a 30-man roster, I've just named 6 players who, again, on paper, are good central midfielders. You could argue we don't have an out-and-out 6. We don't have a destroyer who can roam and help our defense. I would argue that Edu Leuven can be that player. And we haven't seen Edu Leuven for large amounts of time play that role because we've needed him to do other things. But by having Tomas Ostrak, or by having Conrad Wallem, or even Chris Durkin, who is not an out-and-out 6 by himself, in that role, it allows you to play with that double pivot. We're not trying to implement a 4-1-4-1 type of a situation. We're trying to implement a 4-2-3-1 by having a double pivot. So that, to me, is why we haven't seen a pursuit of a 6, even though I think in previous weeks we talked about wanting a 6 because of all the injuries and the unknowns to Edu Leuven and Chris Durkin continuing to have knee issues, Alfredo Morales being on the wrong side of 30. Tomas Ostrak at the time was having issues with that fluid buildup that we didn't know about. So now, as we stand in July, I think it's a little bit of a different story. If Leuven can continue to be a presence, he continues to ramp up his minutes and see consistent time each game, that changes it with Chris Durkin returning, with Tomas Ostrak being now 100% healthy, Conrad Wallem is there and healthy, and Alfredo Morales is returning. That's my answer to why we haven't pursued a 6. Daniel Gavura. With the season loss, what does Critchley have to do to get the permanent job? How do you even evaluate him when he hasn't been working with a full squad? Well, you could probably make a similar argument to Olaf Melberg. He didn't have a full squad, and yet you saw enough from him to know that a full squad wasn't going to really change some things. That to me is more of the mindset, is you understand the philosophy that he's implementing, the response from the players. You want to see consistent growth in performance and in results. And I'm not saying you've seen all of that so far, but those to me are some of the things that that go into judging Critchley almost independent of the results. And I don't think, at least right now on July 24th, I don't think we've seen enough to say Critchley deserves the job. But that's not to say that he can't take some of these incoming players like Songbin, like Follow Fall, implement them into the system in a month's time, and then the last 10 games of the season go on a run that vastly eclipses Hackworth's end of season performance last year and actually earns a legitimate discussion as a permanent head coach. That's possible, but it's going to take quite the run in the last 10 or so games of the season to be able to prove that to me. Let's see who all has options. Well, if I look to some of these players, every single player on our roster has an option except for Roman Berkey, Ben Lunt, and Caden Glover, and Devin Padelford. So Padelford's on loan to the end of 2025. Caden Glover is under contract through 2027. It's Ben Lunt and Roman Berkey this year who do not have options, whose contracts are up this year and do not have options. Everybody else is a huge question mark. You have guys like Songbin, whose contract's up this year, Klouse, whose contract's up this year, Chris Durkin's contract's up this year. Those are DPs and U22s who all have options for 2026. You also have Henry Kessler, whose contract is up with an option for 26. And then you go into the rest of the senior roster, who you're looking at guys like Alfredo Morales, and Jean de Silva and Conrad Wallem, who's also on loan. Conrad Wallem, if we picked up his contract, we'd be able to pick up his option for 2026. And then guys like Alfredo Morales and Jean de Silva, they have options for 2026 as well. After that, it is the supplemental roster that can be entirely remade. You're looking at Josh Yarrow. I mentioned Ben Lunt and Ben Lunt. You have Jay Reed. You have Akil Watts, Joey Zielinski, Christian Oliveris, Michael Wenzel, Haziel Orozco, and Devin Padelford on loan. All of those players, our contracts are up at the end of 2025. And then you have Miguel Perez. You guys remember Miguel Perez? We watched him a lot in City 2. He's played some right back here recently. He's on our supplemental slot 31s, which is basically a full season loan down to City 2. His contract is up after 2025 as well. He has options for 26 and 27. So when Lutz talks about playing for your contract, all of those guys I just mentioned are who he's talking to. City can just decline you and be done with you. They could pick up your option if you've deserved it, and they can remake half of their roster at the end of this season. Absolutely remarkable amount of turnover that City could have at the end of this season. But it also kind of makes sense because some of these guys rather on the senior roster, on the supplemental roster, some of these guys on the supplemental roster are holdovers from City 2 and our initial roster build. And they may have done enough to earn another look, another year, earn a continued spot on the supplemental roster. And I'm talking specifically about Josh Yarrow, Akil Watts, Michael Wenzel, and guys who you needed them for specific things, injuries that have occurred outside of transfer windows, the short-term loans that happened last year with Michael Wenzel. But do you really want to continue using these roster slots on these types of players? Josh Yarrow is making $204,000 a year. He's on our supplemental roster, so he doesn't hit the salary cap because he's on the supplemental roster. And that's something a lot of people might forget, is that if you're on the supplemental roster, your salary does not count towards the salary cap, but you're still paying a player $204,000 for Josh Yarrow level performance. And I like Josh Yarrow a lot as a person, but I want us to be spending that money more wiser and better. $204,000 is a pretty significant amount of money in Major League Soccer. It is more than Simon Betcher makes. It is almost on par with what Kyle Hebert makes. It is about what Alfredo Morales makes, and it's approaching what Celio Pompeo makes. So Hebert and Celio earned bigger contracts from their performances. They have spots on the senior roster. There's just a lot of remolding and remaking that's going to happen with a lot of these players this offseason. Sebastian Starrett. When would Durkin's U22 status fall off? End of 2025. A U22 contract is good through the player's age 25 season. So that's one of the bigger things about the U25 or U22 initiative is that you have to sign your U22 contract before you turn 22, and it's valid through your age 25 season. And I do know my graphic is wrong on this one. I haven't updated it. Chris Durkin is in fact 25 years old. He turns 26 February 8th of 2026. So this is his age 25 season. He'll turn 26 next year. He will not qualify if we pick up his option. He will not qualify for U22 initiative. So we would presumably have to pay that $520,000 of his salary be hitting our budget. So that's doubling up what his salary hit is to our roster. When we activate his option, we would activate his option after the season ends. So we wouldn't be, we could announce it right now, but it wouldn't do us any good. We could say we are exercising our option now to pick up Durkin's 2026 contract. That doesn't change anything for 2025. He remains U22 through the end of the season. It would just change his designation and salary cap hit for next season. A lot of questions about Diego in the chat. I think the other, we were playing without a spine for a season and a half now. That's a really good point by Mel. That's been an issue ever since Jabulu Blom kind of stopped seeing time. Edu Leuven's injuries and outages are a big problem. Center backs with Kessler and Nilsson, especially. Nilsson was supposed to be a part of that spine. So I think the signing of Falou Fall is an attempt to look at the spine 2.0 or 3.0, depending on how you look at it. It might even be looking at a post-Henry Kessler spine, but it's definitely looking at a post-Joachim Nilsson spine, in my opinion. And I talked about this last week, that Falou Fall and the amount that we have invested in him as a left-footed center back, that's what Joachim Nilsson was supposed to be for us. The left center back in a two center back look. Falou Fall, that's his spot now. And so that's one reason I'm excited to see him arrive, begin training. He will have that spot by the end of the season. Falou Fall will be our left-sided center back. The other side is up for debate. Henry Kessler with his option. Timo Baumgartel, he's under contract through next season. That's a candidate for that spot as well. And from there, you build the spine and you see, will Chris Durkin be on the roster next season? We don't know. Edu Leuven is under contract through 2026 with an option for 27, so he's presumably there. You've got Marcel Hartl above that, and now even Klouse is a question mark based on the reports we talked about earlier with Club Lyon. So you have now a patchwork of the spine that you're not just running through the rest of the season with because of injuries, but that you're looking to next season. It is a possible scenario that of those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So those 7 players that make up your spine between the goalkeeper, the 2 center backs, the 2 midfielders, the 10 and the 9, that you might only have 3 of those players currently under contract for next season, being Falou Fall, Edu Leuven, and Marcel Hartl. That's quite the story and change of pace from what we thought we would be going into, but that could be a possible reality we face. So Sebastian has another question from earlier, pulling from his question before Stu left. Who do you think benefits the most from Songbin in the squad? Klouse, Totland, Hartl, or other? Totland is an interesting one, obviously, because if you add pace in behind the lines, it does still free up some space on the right side for Totland to move higher up. I would be interested to see how a player who is designed to play on the wing, get in behind the lines, and then go to goal would be kind of playing off of a right back that wants to get up high into enter the final third and deliver service. I think the creativity and taking different teams by surprise and offering a different look is what the design for that is. So I do think Totland can have some space opened up a little bit more by what Songbin can do out there. Ultimately, I do think it's a benefit for Marcel Hartl as well. Hartl has struggled, I think, in delivering service in the run of play to a lot of players, finding space. And so having that extra option deeper on the right side, I think will benefit where Hartl can deliver the ball, and it will open up space. It'll pull defenses a little wider, open up space for even some of the other players, but it's ultimately Hartl that's really all over the place, delivering that service and finding the right spaces. So a player like Songbin opening up areas more vertical and wider on the right, that obviously gives us a lot of benefit to a player like Marcel Hartl. Questions in the chat about Nico Gioacchini. Man, I love the Nico Gioacchini chats. Bring back Gio. Why would we want to bring back Gio? He hasn't done anything since he left here. Yeah, but Brian, remember what he did when he was here? That's what I go back to. Maybe he's a system guy. Maybe we sold him when his value was high and he succeeded with us, but he can't succeed anywhere else, whether it's given the opportunity or not. Because I think all of us that followed Como for that 2 or 3 months after Nico was signed by them realized that they really just didn't know what to do with them, didn't play with them. Hard to know what happened with Nico after that. Josh Sargent conversation in the chat of the move to, I think it was Wolfsburg, fell through. Sargent reportedly didn't want to go back to the Bundesliga. And then with Klouse going, there was some conversation on social media about we should use that money to pay for Sargent. Don't really have anything deep to say on that other than I don't think it's going to happen. And I saw a comment, I can't remember who it's from, so I'm sorry for not crediting you. I would rather see that $20 to $25 million we would have to pay for Josh Sargent be used more up and down our roster. I'm a fan of spending high on designated players, but I'm also a fan on spending higher on more TAM players. We're full up on U22s for this season, but into next season. Spending more on that level of player because MLS doesn't have a ton of roster slots and a ton of wiggle room for higher value players. But if you can increase your ceiling on a wider basis throughout your roster, I think you're really going to be doing yourself a better service than one individual player dumping 20 to 25, because that would be unheard of for St. Louis City's roster spend, at least so far. And I don't really have anything to compare that to just because we haven't done that yet. So I think we're probably going to wind down a little bit. I'm not going to address the training team. I think I took the roster thing down for the live chat, but I've seen some comments here recently about why don't people in the media room question the training staff? Why haven't we asked the hard questions about, why is Kessler still injured, or what's taking Durkin so long to come back, or why did guys come back and then they get injured really quickly or re-injured? All I can say, guys, is we ask the questions. There aren't pre-scripted responses that are going to make everybody happy. The club is going to release the information that they're going to release. So asking the questions is all we can do. And I asked that question. Tom Timmerman asks that question. Justin Horniker asks that question. Matthew Rocchio asks that question. They get asked. But the answers that we are given aren't the most transparent answers in the world. They don't have to be, because the team doesn't owe us anything, but all we can do is ask the question. So if you're gonna be frustrated by something, you can be frustrated by the fact that they continue to happen and you don't see any changes in the performance staff. You don't see any differences in training models or at least of what we see or know. But don't be upset about the media asking questions in St. Louis, because I can promise you we do. There's no retribution that the media has ever gotten by St. Louis City in asking certain questions. I'll tell you that. So I asked a question earlier this year about Olaf Melberg and his assistants when it was getting to the nitty-gritty time about needing to the fan base and me in particular wanting answers about why are we continuing down this trajectory. It was obvious to me that Olaf wasn't going to lose his job at that time. And so if Olaf wanted to keep his job, I thought the next best option is you have to make some tactical changes to your staff. Asked him that question point blank. Nothing happened to me afterwards. I questioned his continuing usage of his staff and if he's going to make any changes. There's nobody from City that, to my knowledge, cares about what kind of questions get asked. Everything's fair game. There has never been a line that has ever been crossed. There's never been anything that has been said to myself or anybody that I know of about, hey, you can't ask that question, or we'd really appreciate you not to talk about that next time. If they don't want to answer a question, they will not answer a question. Like when I asked David Critchley the other day about the roster construction and his part in it, he was very transparent. I don't deal with that. I can't answer that. I'm not going to give an opinion on it because I don't deal with that. That's what they'll do. It's nothing more than that. So that's my spiel on the club having any negative feelings about questions that are asked, but also the media asking the questions that fans want to hear, because we ask when I get a chance. And I take great pride and responsibility in being able to ask those kinds of things. And I appreciate everybody for wanting the feet held to the fire. But sometimes you just don't get the answers that you want. And when you're on a losing streak and the season's going the way it is, you're going to be frustrated. You have every right as a fan to be frustrated. And I just want you to know, media has that kind of same concerns. We want those same answers because we like covering. I love covering winning clubs, a winning club. This club that I love when they're winning much more than I do when they're losing. It's fun by nature. Last question I think I'm going to get to on this one is, what do you see as the best case scenario for the rest of the season? I should have had an answer all wrapped up for that one. But best case scenario for the rest of the season is probably seeing more improvement from the players that we have who would be on our roster for next year. Seeing something more positive, more akin to last season from Cedric Toyshirt. Seeing better production and more consistent production. Seeing a balance of attack and defense. Seeing better performances from some of the kids, some of the younger players, the 21, 22s. If Mekhi Joyner is able to find a way on the supplemental roster, seeing a performance from him. It's, and I hate to talk about it in July, but it is building for the future, because this season we don't seem to have a whole lot to play for other than not winning the wooden spoon, which everybody in the chat is now talking about. So as long as we don't win the wooden spoon, that's because we don't want that in our trophy case. But the other parts are just seeing consistency and growth from some of the players that we're going to be relying on in the future. I hate to say it's an extended preseason, because it's admittedly stupid to say, because you have half of an actual MLS season left to play, or a third of an MLS season left to play. But that's kind of what it is. A lot of the players that are going to be on your roster for next season. You need to see what you have to work with, and you need to be better prepared going into next season. If that means blowing up some of the roster now, like Lutz might have been referring to, do that. Drop some of the dead weight, drop some of the weight that you just know you're not going to be carrying into the offseason. Make some more risky movements this transfer window. That may be something I really want to see for the rest of the season. And I know I said that was the last thing, but Daniel asked, what are your thoughts on Garber's comments on changing the season and maybe playoff format? The season change, I think, is it's just one of those things that's going to happen. It was an inevitability. And I know there's a perennial conversation between playing in the winter and the cold months versus playing in the summer and the hot months. St. Louis is kind of the worst of both worlds in a lot of ways, where it's going to be frigid in January and February. It's going to be 100 degrees this weekend against Minnesota United. You can't win in a lot of ways. You're either going to be extremely hot in the dead of summer, or you're going to be really cold in the dead of winter. The best examples, the best thing I could hope for is that when you make that change, after probably 2027 is when it's going to happen. Now, nothing was announced this week. The announcement was that no announcement was being made, but MLS is continuing to work towards it. The writing is on the wall that it's going to happen probably after the 2027 season. And the best case scenario for me in that shift is they learn something from the Bundesliga, that you need to take some kind of a time off, a break in the absolute dead cold of the winter. That will, you look up and down at Farmer's Almanac, you look at all the data of the absolute coldest months historically and in the last few years, and you take that couple of weeks off. You take 2 or 3 weeks off during that time. The Bundesliga, I think, does it fairly well in trying to mitigate the frigid cold months, and that's the best you can do. Beyond that, the playoff changes, I think, had an air of excitement to them. There was making things more unique in the North American landscape, while still keeping the playoff format, keeping the playoff format, and making it more playoffs than, say, like the EFL Championship type thing, where you have the top 4 or 6 teams. You're still needing to add that live match allotment to Apple. And I think that's one reason why MLS added the play-in game, was to give extra live matches for MLS Season Pass. Whatever they're going to do, I think it's going to take into consideration not wanting to drop the overall number of matches. And I haven't thought about it deep enough to see what kind of format actually could be exciting, whether it's continuing to have like a best of 3 or a single elimination, a round robin kind of a thing. I don't know. But if it makes it more unique, I'm willing to entertain it at the very least. That'll do it, I think. So if you stuck with us for this long, I appreciate you. Thank you for entertaining us on Flyover Footy, for talking the transfer window, Minnesota United, and just odds and ends random talks. Appreciate you guys on the live stream, and for those listening to Flyover Footy on the podcast. Enjoy the game against Minnesota. If you have anything positive or negative for me, Stu, or the rest of us, drop us a line at Flyover Footy, at Matt Baker STL. Leave us a review if you get a chance on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. That stuff really helps us out. 5-star reviews if you're inclined. I hope so. Let us know if there's anything else you want to see different on Flyover Footy. But at the very least, thanks for sticking with us and the club. Thank you for watching the club week in and week out and caring about this team that we all care about so much. We'll be back for Fallout after Minnesota United, and hopefully Santi and I get to celebrate a win. Hopefully we get to celebrate a Songbin brace, maybe, among other things. So for now, I'll bid you guys farewell, and I'll thank you for tuning into Flyover Footy. Good luck, St. Louis, against Minnesota United, and we'll talk to y'all later. All right, folks. Thank you so much on the live stream. You guys, I loved every single thing I saw in the chat. If I didn't get to you, I'm so sorry, but I appreciate all the questions. You guys are the best. Thank you, and have a good night all.